Grenville, you are a professor of music at the Canterbury Christ Church University and director of the Sidney Dehaene Research Centre for Arts and Health in Folkestone, United Kingdom. You are also engaged as a member of the scientific board of Singing Hospital, an international network for the promotion of singing in healthcare settings. Can you explain more about the research you are doing at your research centre related to singing, well-being and health?
Yes, certainly. Well, our research has been now, I think, in existence for over 10 years. And we first began our research by looking at the impact of singing on people who were singing in a choir. It happened to be my choir that I was directing, and my colleague Stephen Clift, who's the other director of the Sidney Dehaene Research Centre for Arts and Health. He and I collaborated on this research to investigate what was happening to people as they were singing, why were they singing, and what effects did it have upon them as people. And the results were very interesting. And they were so interesting that we repeated the research, modified the methodology slightly, modified the instruments to include some group discussions and some individual interviews, together with the questionnaires that the 70, 80, 90 people took part in. So it was a very good base for everything that followed, really, because the results were very encouraging. The results were suggesting that there were sociological impacts of singing, there were psychological impacts of singing, there were physical impacts of singing. And that prompted us to try to look at singing rather more closely as an activity, and that's what's been happening over the last 10 years.
So can you tell something more about how singing is doing? What happens in the body or in the brain or in the soul? How can you explain these effects?
Well, I wish I could explain everything, but of course I'm not an expert in neurology or psychology or sociology, but I think what seems to be happening is a multi-dimensional effect of a very simple process. But this simplicity of the process that singing is, I think, is the key to what is happening. The fact is, as Stephen Mithen suggests in his excellent book, Singing Neanderthals, is that singing has been a part of the evolutionary process of the individual for millions of years. And in fact, of course, singing precedes every other form of acquired behaviour. We come into the world making sounds that are very narrowly defined, and regardless of where we are in the world, those pitches that we're using are the ones that we use to elicit responses in other people, elicit responses about care, love, food, warmth, shelter, and so forth. All the basic presumptions of life are contained within the sound that we make. Now that's really very important, I think, because that impact upon the psychology of our lives must be profound. If we just take that as a starting point, that the first sounds we make when we come into the world are responded to by somebody who loves us, let's say. So that sound then we repeat, and the repeated sound is acted on by the person who loves us. So there's a bonding that takes place through that sound making. So if we transplant that to singing as we know it now, then one can, I think, assume that the same process is going on. That when we're listening to somebody sing, somehow we're having a reference back to the very starting point. So that's one aspect. Physically, of course, we're engaged in a huge amount of corporal activity to make us sing. We have to breathe, we have to use our muscles in our body. in particular ways. We have to use the muscles of our jaws and our throat and so forth. And all these aspects would seem to be important for some people who may be having difficulty in using particular muscles. So again, the very natural aspect of singing, the innate skill that everybody has, is something we can call upon to help people who are having difficulties in calling upon those particular aspects of physical activity. And then an increasing amount of neural research seems to suggest that the brain is fully activated when we are singing. I know that through qualitative documentation and through interviews with some of our research participants, the suggestion is that when we sing, we are not thinking about anything other than the singing, whether it is the text, the melody, just the sound, the impact of the sound around us, and so forth. And of course that then, those impressions are then made concrete by the scanning pictures that we are able to see now of the brain when we are singing. The fact that the brain seems to be fully occupied by being flooded by blood when we sing. So there seems to be a direct physical connection between the singing process and the neurological pathways that control everything we do. There's three aspects then of something that all relates to the very simple and intuitive, instinctive aspect that singing is for each and every person.
When I visited some singing groups in South England, which are related to your research projects in Folkestone or in Canterbury, I also got the impression that the social dimension plays a big role in singing and health, where people get into contact and there's some kind of connectedness. So maybe you can tell something more about the role of the social dimension.
Yes, of course, the impact of singing together, I would suggest, amplifies all the things that we've been talking about so far. That to sing with somebody else has an extraordinary impact. The sum of the parts becomes so important that even if I'm feeling weak when I sing, if I'm with a group of people who are not so weak as me, or perhaps just a little stronger than I am, then the impact can be quite significant. And I feel better in myself. I'm able to contact people through sound when I might be having difficulty looking at them straight in the face, but I can hear what they're saying to me through singing. So that social aspect is really very important. And if it starts from that very basic platform, then it becomes very quickly, I think, established that people then begin to relate to each other and bond with each other, and so a sort of notion of team building emerges. And that has been our experience with all the singing groups that we've established as part of the research programs, whether it's been people who have lung problems, or people who have psychological problems, or people with Parkinson's disease. The same factor is established, the social aspects of coming together as a group to sing, to enjoy the singing just for its own sake, is so important that self-identity as well as group identity is increased.